Welcome to another Creative Podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. If you've been listening to the podcast lately, I think it's kind of obvious that I've had a lot on my mind. And because I've been in a weird place mentally, I have also just been having a lot of conversations. So you all get to benefit from what I've learned from these conversations. And today's episode is really important to me personally because I think this is just something that a lot of us don't ever really even want to admit to ourselves. And that is, you're probably getting in the way of your own success. I know for me personally, this has been very true for quite some time now. One of the recent conversations I had was actually with my therapist this last week, and we were talking about something that I've kind of just been going through, and she was kind of telling me all these like examples and metaphors and all these things, and she was like, "Do you know why I'm telling you this?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "Well," she didn't say this verbatim, but like long story short was, only I can make the change. Only I can be the one to do the thing. And I remember thinking to myself like, oh my gosh, am I the problem? And when it came to like the specific thing we're talking about, I'm not the problem, but in a way, I actually was the problem because I was the one who was the only person who could make the change that I needed. And that was kind of like a hard pill for me to swallow. And that's because for a long time, I just kept thinking like, I'm not the problem here. I'm not the problem. And while I'm not the problem, that doesn't mean I'm still not the one who can make a change. So while I feel like this conversation has been quite circular, this episode is for those who have thought the following. Maybe you're someone who's too scared to start something new. Or maybe you've tried something new, but you fell off and you don't really know how to start up again. Or you're wondering what life would have looked like if you would have continued giving it a shot. I mean, I know I definitely have. And today we're just going to talk about all things regarding why you're the one who's getting in the way of your own success. So I think as humans, it's very normal for us to honestly want to blame external factors for why we're not successful. I feel like that's kind of the first thing. Unless you're really hard on yourself, then you're probably gonna be thinking like, no, I failed. It was my fault. But I think when it comes to this specific topic, we're not talking about external forces. We're talking about how it comes from within us. And I think there's two ways on how this comes from within. The first one is just kind of like who you are, essentially. So your beliefs, your habits, even your fears. Or the second thing could just be simply self-sabotaging. And some of these things we may already be aware of. Some of these things we may have not even realized are what's getting in the way of us succeeding. So think about it for a bit, see where you may kind of fall. And throughout this episode, I will kind of just dive into all these things just because I know there's going to be someone out there who may resonate with at least one of these things, and I hope this can help. So let's talk about how this happens. We're going to hit the first point: habits, beliefs, fears, all those things. Let's say you have a goal you're trying to achieve, but your day-to-day habits just don't align. I feel like this is a really easy one. For example, this last year, I really wanted to focus on my mental health and fitness. And I started to notice that going to the gym whenever I wanted just wasn't helping me reach the goal of getting stronger. So for the last 3 to 4 months, I've made it my goal to go to the gym at least 2 to 3 times a week. And 3 times trying to be my minimum, 2 times being if I'm having the worst week ever. But that has been a non-negotiable I've made with myself, and I've noticed such a big difference because I'm visibly seeing myself get stronger. I can also feel myself inside getting stronger mentally because I'm holding myself accountable, and I'm actually feeling good about hitting a goal I had set for myself. That is just a very simple, basic example. However, beliefs or thoughts, all these things, we can't really see them, but it's something you can become aware of. And when you start to have thoughts that maybe aren't the most positive, or you have thoughts that, I'll get to it eventually. I'll get to it one day. Not, I get to do this, so I'm going to do this. Those thoughts, the way you think, the way you approach and view things, that could be the difference between you following through and succeeding and you just not even giving yourself a shot. And most importantly, like, our fears can easily get in the way of just about anything, but truly our success. So thinking that being afraid that you're going to fail, that's a really big fear a lot of people have. And that's why they don't even take the first step in starting something that they want to be successful in. And it's quite sad that sometimes people's journeys end at their fears before they even begin. So I recommend really getting to try to know yourself. And if you have fears, if you have these thoughts that aren't very positive, acknowledge them. They are part of being human, but these are things that you can also work on improving and changing as you go throughout your journey. And improving on those things could be a step that you take to help you get one step closer to succeeding in the thing that you want to do. Now let's talk self-sabotaging. This could kind of fall under like our beliefs, but I think this is a separate thing because self-sabotaging could be as simple as making bad decisions. I know, for one, as a creative, I've made so many bad decisions. I still am making bad decisions as a creative and knowingly making bad decisions for myself. We're trying to really work on that now. Like, I think we're doing much better, but I'm cleaning up the aftermath of a lot of bad decisions. So, anywho, that's not why we're here. Just putting yourself in places you know you shouldn't be in, saying yes to opportunities you know don't serve you, working with people you know don't align with your goals or your beliefs or your thoughts or whatever. All these things are also forms of self-sabotage, and it's something that like you're either aware of and you still do, or, which honestly was my case, or it's something that you kind of need to like reflect on a little bit and think about, like, dang, do I want to keep doing this? Do I not? But even just like everyday decisions could be a way of hurting your chances of succeeding in something. If you've been listening to the podcast for a bit, you would know that I've talked quite a bit about perfectionism. And I think, perfectionism goes hand in hand sometimes with like avoidance and procrastination. These are all things that we kind of do to just prevent us from getting hurt, facing the things that scare us, giving ourselves a shot even. Like, these are things that we sometimes just do because what if I take that next step towards my future or towards succeeding and I fail? But if I don't do those things, if I wait till I'm perfect, if I just take my time until it's just right to do the thing, then it'll all work out. But like, these outcomes are just not guaranteed. It's not something that we can't always see what's on the other side. And that's part of the journey, just going out there, doing the thing, giving it our all and hoping that it pays off. And it's one of the reasons why I created a whole episode about starting as you are, as is, just starting ugly, because you just have to sometimes just take the first step forward to even make a difference in your life or whatever it is you want to achieve. You just have to do something. And waiting around, putting it off, you're always going to wonder what would have happened. These are all examples of how we self-sabotage and get in the own way of our own success. Once again, this episode is really just trying to touch base on like our inner selves. It's trying to find what is happening internally that's getting in the way of us being successful. So if you're out there listening to this, whether you're creative or not, I hope maybe this helps bring you a little bit of comfort or guidance to help you kind of work through whatever it is that's stopping you from achieving the success that you wish to have. So now you pointed out all these things, but how do we break the cycle? Honestly, if someone casually asked me this, I would just say like, go to therapy, figure it out. That's what I did. However, I did give you guys some advice that my therapist gave me, so you're welcome. But also, I do have some like tidbits I also think might be helpful for you. So obviously, if you're dealing with the following, just work on those things. Like, procrastination's your problem. Don't procrastinate, get things done. If you're avoiding things, face them. These are all very basic things, but I think there's other things that you could do to break this cycle of just getting in your own way. And one of my things lately has actually been to focus on improving rather than focus on proving myself to others. This mindset shift has really made a difference for me. I even have it as the wallpaper on my phone as part of my vision board, because I think for so long in my career, I was someone who just kept trying to prove myself to every single person. I kept trying to prove my worth to people. I kept trying to prove that I was worthy of sitting in the chairs that I was sitting in, standing in the rooms I was in. I just was constantly chasing the approval of others, that I was enough. But after some time, I realized I've always been enough. And not only am I deserving of every opportunity I've had, I'm also deserving of so much more. And that those negative beliefs and those thoughts that I just kept holding on to for so long were actually what was getting in the way of me achieving the success I want to have. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned this last year was that, like, if you're trying to do things for the sake of others, you're always going to feel like you failed. You're always going to feel like it's not enough, because when you start doing things for yourself and you understand your self-worth and you embrace all that, you won't feel like you failed. On the topic of failure, another thing to keep in mind that I think would be helpful for most is, changing your mindset of, oh my gosh, I failed, to, oh my goodness, I learned something new. I learned a new way to not do this, and I discovered another way to continue up on my path of success. When you start shifting your mindset to no longer viewing mess ups as failures, and instead of just viewing your mess ups as building blocks to your success, your perspective changes a lot, and you start to embrace this mindset of abundance. And that could be the difference. That little switch in mindset could also be the difference between one succeeding and one never getting even close to reaching their journey of success. And speaking of journeys and success, I think today's society has taught us a lot about what we define success as, because for some people it's views and clicks. For some people, success is a number in their bank account. But I think there's a difference between people who have physical markers as success versus those who view success as a journey that is filled with peaks and valleys and something that just continues. And for me lately, I realized I have embraced more of that never-ending journey viewpoint when it comes to success. And I think it's helped with not only getting back up on my journey of what success looks like, but also just helping me evolve as a creative and grow into the person that I am proud to be. And you can listen to my most previous episode or the episode before this if you kind of want to learn more about that journey that I've been going on. But breaking the cycle is not going to look the same for everybody. And that's kind of the great part about all this, is that all of our journeys are going to look so different. But it's really important for you to carve out your own path for what success may look like, feel like, all the things. But my last tidbit on breaking the cycle is also just one that is obviously easier said than done, but that is trying to identify your own self-worth outside of your work. Because I think for a lot of people, especially me, and I've talked about this before as well, but when you separate your work from who you are as a person, it's a lot easier to navigate the world, because It just is when you are not your job, when you are not your work. It's a lot easier to problem solve when you're looking at something as its own thing versus it being a part of you. And as creatives, I think this is super difficult for us to do. And something I think we're always going to struggle with to some degree. But when you are able to acknowledge that work and the journey that you're on and success and all these things is not tied to who you are, it makes it easier to navigate life and your journey to success. Wow, take a shot every time I say success in this episode. Please don't. We're almost done. It's not. Don't. Well, I have left you with some thoughts on how to get through this. I also do want to give you some unfiltered thoughts in the sense of my 2 cents about us getting in the way of our own success. As cliche as it sounds, a lot of the things I'm going to say are probably cliches, but they're cliches for a reason, you know? So first off, I do think that we are our own biggest critic and the worst critic, and we are also our biggest roadblocks when it comes to wanting to be successful, because only we know how much things mean to us. Only we know how scary things are. And when you know all those things, it's a lot easier to play it safe and protect ourselves than put ourselves out there with the risk of possibly getting hurt or falling flat on your face and having to clean up a mess. But having to go through hardships is inevitable. And we have seen all the classic movies where we cheer on the person who has fallen flat on their face and they feel like it's the worst day of their lives and it just can't simply get worse. But it does, because it's a movie. But also, movies are just short pieces of people's lives, and I think that can actually be applied to our own lives in the sense of when you're going through a hardship, that's just one film. A lot of times, especially nowadays, there are sequels. So, long ramble aside, we are going to go through ups and downs in our journey to success, but only you can decide if you're ready to face those things. And you know what? If you have a positive mindset, if you truly believe the universe is in your favor, you may not even realize how deep the pits are. Perspective is everything. And I think that if you're willing to embrace everything that comes with going on a journey of being successful, you're going to be okay. You're going to succeed. And alongside with that, you have to be someone who's willing to fall 8 times and get back up 9 times. Those people are the ones who will succeed. Me, for example, I have been so inconsistent with this podcast since I started it. I started off really strong. I had a good run going on YouTube. I'm not going to lie. Within 10 episodes, I actually had a video go viral for me. And I gained most of my YouTube following from it. Since then, I've kind of dropped off a little bit. But you know what? We are still going to make it to the end of the season. I am hustling because I refuse to give up on this. No matter how inconsistent I've been with it, no matter how little marketing I've done with it, this is something I'm so passionate about that I'm willing to fall and get back up every single time and get up on this mic. I've been so embarrassed to share so many things that I've spilled on this podcast with real people in my life, but I know there's value in my experiences and my thoughts, so I want to share that with you guys. I'm taking the risk to put myself out there and be vulnerable, but it's because I think it's worth it. I feel in my gut that if I keep going at this, this will pay off no matter what that looks like. Honestly, with the turnout of this podcast already, I feel like it's been successful for me because it's something that I'm so proud to have worked on and to put out there and to tell people about. And because I already feel like I've won, I've succeeded, I feel like the sky's the limit for me. And I know it may sound kind of silly to say things like that because there are people who are farther along on their journeys within the same industry or similar industries, and they've reached what other people may see as success. But when you are in charge of your journey to success, when you're the one who's responsible and the only one who's capable of making the changes that need to be done to get you to where you want to be, not a single outside voice or opinion matters at all. The only voice or opinion that matters is mine and how I feel about it. And that's kind of my little rambly rant on this, because I just know there's so many creators out there who feel like they're constantly failing because they keep falling, or they're getting inconsistent, or they're avoiding doing things, or avoiding putting themselves out there. They're dealing with life, all these things. But I want you guys to know that you're not alone. So many of us are actually in that same boat, but so many of us are also still trying to get back up and do the thing. So yeah, if you're someone who keeps falling off the horse, I'm going to be there to help you get up, and you're going to give it another shot, no matter how many times you have to. But giving up isn't an option. At least that's how I view all of this. If you've made it this far and you can only take one thing from today's episode, I want it to be this. You don't need to change who you are to succeed. You just need to change how you show up in the world. I truly think that's what makes the biggest difference. And it's something that I have truly seen for myself. So with that being said, that is all I have for today's episode. Thank you guys for listening. We are 2 episodes away from season 1 ending, and I'm just so happy you're here. So until next time, bye.